Anyway, at some point there will be a slide behind me, which basically just reads all the random jobs I've had, and actually I've had much more random jobs. So I really come out of immersive theatre, I've been a co-artistic director, I've currently made loads of playful theatre, I've been a creative photographer wide in the space, I'm reading my own screen now, and currently I run something called the Audience Labs, which is really trying to figure out what it is. It was born in the Royal Opera House and it's sort of changed things right now. So what, in essence, I've been doing for 20 years is make shows with audiences, for audiences across the board, and then slowly technology crept in. And it's sort of exciting and not exciting to me. So what I'll do today is go through loads of work I've done to sort of make a point about where I am right now and what I'm interested in. Hopefully that's interesting. So, what I'll do is talk before slides. So I really often get asked to talk about technology. And it's not really, I'm not a technologist, I'm not very strong at it, and it's not really where I come from. So I really started to work in culture because I love it, because it's a place for, it's a civic space, it's a space for collective imagination. It's where we come together and do weird things. It's deeply practical because we make stuff. We make stuff and then it's there. And it's deeply impractical because it's also like endless talks about philosophy and social progression and all of those things. And I think that's what I love. So for me, technology is something that is in the world and therefore started to permeate in my work, both because it's really practical when you make something, especially when the audience is involved, to have technology to push things forward and to organize space. And simultaneously, it also was everywhere. I went to the Art Academy in the Netherlands, where I'm from. I lived in Amsterdam in sort of the mid-90s. Techno-utopia was rife. We were going to make the world. That has changed a lot over time, but that sort of roots where I'm from. So, at some point, there might be a slide, which would be really exciting. So, so one of the slides might say something like, what I'm really interested in with digital is what it's for, not for its own sake. So for me, digital spaces can be stages. It's something in which, where we can gather around, work can be made for, we can put stuff up. For me, it's also deeply a place to connect. My family is also in the Netherlands. I have quite emotional experiences, you know, even in the before times, via what was then still Skype. My father has not discovered Zoom, so we still do Skype. So for me, that idea of connection with beyond borders is really, really important and deeply embedded why I'm interested in digital. And it's also a place for collective imagination. You can do such weird stuff with technology, and that's exciting. So it also becomes this sort of really malleable space. So the quote, I'm going to read this to you because literally I found it yesterday, and I got really excited. This is from, I didn't write down when it's from. I think it's in a book from 1983. And it's, I just stole it from a New Yorker article from 2017. I am so hip and onto the time. It's from a Jamaican cultural theorist called Stuart Hall, who I'm now obsessed with. If you want, my birthday's coming up, Stuart Hall books, please. He says, culture, after all, is a matter of constructing a relationship between oneself and the world. People have to have a language to speak about where they are and what other possible futures are available to them. I think that's what I do. Look. And as you now already know, digital spaces can be stages and places to connect and a space for collective imagination. There is no Stuart Hall quote on a slide because I found it yesterday. So for me, this is it. It is that space for collective imagination. This idea that culture is a space where we can really try and imagine together how we want to live together, reflect on who we are and who we want to be, and sort of start imagining where we want to go. I think that is, you know, the kernel that's still in me from late 90s, like really positivity around technology, and it's become very complicated, and I'm very aware, but I think optimism is a tool. So, I do want to very much say, not like this. This is what we, I think, are and should be the antidote to. So for me, I'm interested in this. It's like, is culture a place where we can do things and make things that are part of our collective imagination, that gives us that thing that Stuart Hall talks about, that language to speak about where we are and what other possible futures there might be? How do we use technology and liveness, culture as that space where these things can come together, to really think together, to imagine together, to create spaces away from the day-to-day that can forefront voices that maybe aren't heard elsewhere, that can be an antidote against this man. And it's not just about what the work's about, it's how we make it. I think that's what really, really, really excites me. So, I'm going to go through some random projects I happen to have made in the last 20 years. Oh, I think one of the things I want to say before we do this, I'm doing this talk at this really weird point. So as of November last year, I joined King's University for part-time, and I'm freelancing part-time. I have dedicated myself to making any art for a year. This is the first time in 20 years that I'm not making anything, and that's where all this comes from to a certain extent. So back to the work I did make for 20 years. So constellations. So this is where I'm at right now. I think I've been looking back at what's important about the work I've been making and what inspires me about it, and sort of trying to look forward a little bit. So I've been using this word constellation. This is a terrible picture when you blow it up, isn't it? Apologies for the pixelation. I've been using the word constellation quite a lot in the past because I'm really interested in things that come together, that resonate with each other, that are their own thing, that are allowed to have their own voice, that are precious and beautiful in their own right, whether they are humans or pieces of work, but that have relationships and seek out relationships with others. There is no sun in this. These are all beautiful things in their own right, but when they come together, they acquire extra meaning. And I think for me, there's something really beautiful in that concept of constellation. So I've talked about this in relationship to how we work in rooms, around audiences, about different pieces of work that seek kinship, about different practitioners that seek kinship. Constellations. Keep this in mind because it's going to come up a lot. So, I'm going to show you a video of something I made 10 years ago. The quality of the video is terrible because I made this 10 years ago, and I really went into like some random Dropbox and found this. I absolutely loved making this show. It's the kind of work that I made with Coney, which I was co-artistic director of for 10 years. We made playable theatre. This show is a show in which the audience was the interim government of a fictional nation in ruins. So they literally found themselves at the early days and hopefully of a better nation. We did a very, so this work is very iterative. So we start small and then build it up, and we do tests. And because the audience is the main character, they become incredibly important. We did a really terrible iteration in Arnolfini. So if anyone saw that 10 years ago, it was literally the worst version of this show that has ever existed. It was very wild. Thank you, Bristol. It went totally, you took a year of my life that night. But I think what's really interesting about this work is that what we try to do is we try to create heightened circumstances for an audience, and situation that hopefully none of us will ever find ourselves in. A country in ruins, the war is over. You are called upon to construct how we live together now. So I'll show you this video. Again, apologies for the quality.
The people are still very, very divided. Once you have a platform of understanding each products to come from different areas. At that point, we can then make a decision as to how we can and it's a
Put in charge of data, the audience must decide how they will run their new nation and how to avoid the mistakes of the past. The future of data is in their hands. How would you rebuild your nation?
Now this is really hard actually, because to make it work as a immersive show where the audience does something and for it to have meaning, it has to be true enough, and it has to say something about politics. It needs to be structured in a way that replicates what happens in the world when power comes into play, but also needs to be playable. So we worked with loads of people to make that show. We iterated, thank you Amafini, sorry Bristol. We worked with audiences all along the way, always, but also we worked with academics who were experts in revolutions, because there's a state of the show which a revolution happens, doesn't always happen. We worked with teenagers, really good at social constructs and like power shifts and how quickly that happens, status. We worked with people who had recently left prison, again, very good at microcosms. We also worked with UK government, their education department of the UK Parliament on it. And what we often did is bring those groups together in the same room. And for me, there was something something happened when a recent prison leaver started to talk about status and democracy and access and authority with academics that spent their lives talking about it. They had a lot to say to each other, and almost for us, just being there to listen was amazing. So for me, I think that sort of constellation of people really comes out of that practice. It's always about the people. It's about creating a multiplicity of people that come together to co-create something. And for me as a lady, to listen and craft from there, rather than trying to somehow make it all come out of my brain. Because, no. So, I'm going to skip slightly ahead because I'm aware that we're slightly running over, and I love Q&A. So I'm going to skip quite quickly to this one. So this one is super recent. This is on the other end of the spectrum. This was on last year. So I'm just going to show you this video, and we'll see what science says. Science says no. This is me talking. I don't know how annoying it is for online if I talk over the sound of the video, but because they're not here. So this is a project which is a hyper-reality show. It's a hyper-reality opera, so it is a physical set. You come in, you get your little VR goggles, little backpack. It's a shared show, so you go in with 4 simultaneously, and you step into this operatic world. So you step into a room which is covered in print. You might see it at the back for me at some point. Put on your goggles, you see the same room, and then the room is integrated. We worked with this amazing company called Figment, who normally do roller coaster rides, and it was just amazing. So this project was really born out of my interest of technology being a way to just as a lever to work just radically different, and also make something that could go somewhere. So this can pop up anywhere. This can go into a shop, this can go into a permanent structure, a semi-permanent structure, can be in a foyer. It's sort of amazing. The first time I saw this technology was in a shopping mall. I did a Star Wars experience. I was a stormtrooper. I got to shoot lots of other stormtroopers about Vader Cannon. We still saved the world. We saved something, a thing. I said what it is. It was amazing. It was really epic. Obviously, it was what it was. It was a thrill ride. but it felt operatic. So for me, it was really interesting to take something so old as opera and so sort of heightened, and then sort of bring that together with something so new and so all-encompassing. It sort of felt like this technology tried to do the same as the art form. There's this German word called Gesamtkunstwerk, which means like sort of total artwork, which is sort of an opera term. And it sort of felt like this was its technological equivalent. And I felt like if we would make an opera in that, it would open up what opera could be, who it's for, who gets to make it, because the creative team doesn't look like a normal creative team, where it can play, and therefore like what its role is in the world. So I think again, that sort of constellation process that we brought to this. We worked with Figment, who were again normally make amusement park rides. They did Darren's Back Ghost Train, they were amazing. They were a whole way of thinking. Then we brought in a team of more classical opera makers, an opera director who, Nish Jones, is amazing, super established opera director, but also started a career as a video designer, so already really got it. I brought in a set designer, Joe Scotcher, who's amazing, who's worked with me on a lot of immersive shows, but also has done a Stay in White show. Game, it's like you know, it's like Stay in White. Work together to figure out what hyper-reality opera actually was, which meant that we tried to figure out what opera is. There is no real answer. We tried to figure out what hyper-reality is. There is no real answer. Brought all those different ways of working, CGI artists, with developers, with opera directors, with composers, to figure out what was exciting about that Venn diagram, where they came together, where that operaticness of hyper-reality met, sort of the beauty and the epicness that opera has. And we made something. And what was really exciting is that we played it sort of mid-pandemic, when it was sort of open, so May last year. And what we saw was really exciting. We had an audience, two bits of audience. One was people who love opera. And they came and went, what the heck is this? I remember this 95-year-old lady, I don't know if she's 95, sorry, looked in. Yeah, she was in for someone to help her. And she sat, and so you walk through this experience, I don't know. She sat down there because, anyway, she could see it. She came in and her opening line was, I don't understand mobile phones or technology. And she went in and loved it and came out and sort of front of house for ages, and it was super emotional. But we also had, you know, I stood with a 15-year-old kid, one of my friends, and they were so cool. And for me, there's something really exciting when those two things meet each other. I'm really excited that Constellation of Process also then having ripple effects. It makes new art, it inspires everyone involved, because everyone is not, you can't do this on automatic pilot, but therefore your audience feels that as well, and it opens up that. So, I want to show you this one. So this is a collaboration. This is called Rules Not Apply. This is so hard. I'm hoping the sound works on this, because this was the hardest to explain without the artists involved. So this was a collaboration with the National Gallery during the pandemic again. But for me, what was exciting about this is its origin story. We did a collaboration with Google Creative Lab, who were beautiful, very early on, probably about 2 years before we did this project. And it was really an R&D. It was behind closed doors, working with a ballerina. So we went, if you mocap ballet, is that any good? So the question was very much like, what does it offer? Does it do anything? Because a lot of like dance is about viscerality and physicality, and if it's digital, what does that do? So for us, that was a real question about what do we want to keep and what is interesting, what makes it better art and what makes it worse art. So we did this whole project. It was gorgeous. I worked with Chris McNally, who is an extraordinary ballerina and choreographer. Really liked how she choreographed, so we asked her to work with us and with the Creative Lab to make choreography specifically for this. So we did a lot of R&D, and she made one where, so for example, we worked with expanding limbs and we cut that. We thought that was really, it just made it so much like for us, it made it too far away from humans and too much like a slinky toy. So we cut that, but in her choreography, she does grow and shrink. She replicates each other herself and becomes her own chorus, which is a very sort of dance thing to do. She also at one point getting rid of her chorus, sort of melts them into this sort of golden liquid, and then she pulls out, she makes man. She pulls out a male dancing partner. She plays around with the atmosphere around her, so she becomes this sort of quite godlike person who plays around with her own powers. And we thought that was really interesting. We also thought it wasn't quite art yet, so we kept it inside. It was like for us trying to understand, trying to get close to the vocabulary about how those two things met each other. But, pandemic, nothing's happening. And I knew, oh yes, I think this is interesting in this context. So when we work with the Creative Lab, I think IP is super important. So we did quite a lot of work on something that's quite simple, where they kept the tech innovation. Audience Labs and the Royal Opera House owned the mocap, and Kristen owned the choreography. So everyone walked away with their thing. We didn't try to, and we could all use each other's work, so this is clause you can put on there, literally everything. But it also meant that everyone could understand the value, even in an R&D where we weren't sure what the outcome would be. It allowed us R&D. So we had this amazing mocap, and it was very expensive, and it was really beautiful. The choreography was gorgeous. So during the pandemic, we went to Chris and said, can we do something with it? So we decided to make an open call in collaboration with the National Gallery. So they brought in a Paula Rigo mural they had, and talked to Paula Rigo going, we're just going to hand that over to some artists, and we're going to give them no rules. They can just do what they want, and they will get this access to this mocap, which is really expensive, and normally they don't get access to. So we had a Paula Rigo mural and this sort of ballet choreography, and then we made a call out, and we commissioned 3 pieces. If this has sound, I'm going to be super pleased. It does not. So I'm going to let it run behind me. So this is Eve, and this video is really a video of the artists that we worked with talking about their work. So this is Fantasia Malmo, which is an extraordinary gender-bending collective that works out of Berlin. And they, it's coming up. Okay, I'm not even going to try and see myself in the video, it's too hard. So, this is Eve. This is just raw material that we handed over. So, Fantasia Malmo, thank you. Thank you, I am so expensive. They started playing with art history. So, for me, what's interesting about this is that I can still see Polarigo, and I can see Kristen's choreography, even all of those things. They always share their DNA, and they are incredibly different. There is the digital technology collective in Berlin with their same aesthetic, a VR creative technologist who's mostly worked in service with other people, stepping into her own role as an artist, Mavjay, and Dennis, who is a visual artist, Nigerian visual artist, who had worked a little bit with technology, but never with 3D. This was her first foray. So what's exciting for me is that it took something that existed that was just in a drawer and gave it life again, and they gave it life again. Dennis's work was the starting point of a piece of work that made it into his first solo show in New York. Mavjay's piece was programmed with an extension of where she landed with us in Brighton Festival. The work is still continuing. Fiona is still evolving right now. She's insane. I can't keep track about what Fiona's doing. Temptations my worst piece. So that's exciting. So the pieces all share a DNA, and they're all interesting in their own right, but also the fact that they all are part of the same constellation makes them even more resonant. Next to that, we're going to commission a writer for each piece to write about that piece. So, Slime Tech wrote about Temptations Malware's piece. Dr. Edson Burton, who's here, wrote the piece that was with Dennis's exploration. And again, we published that next to the pieces. I think, for me, it takes a lot of trust and a lot of dialogue, but for me that idea that their work is speaking to each other, that there's space between them, that there's essays that were commissioned to each other. The film was an open commission, so we asked Daisy, a female who's an amazing documentary maker, filmmaker, we want this story to be told on film. Please do. So it's that sort of openness and trust, and it's constant dialogue back and forth, but it's not so much about commissioning something that has to exist because I want it, but more creating a space in which new things can emerge. And I think for me, again, a constellation of collaboration, of different works talking to each other, different makers talking to each other, different points of view coming together. It's just really exciting. So I'm going to switch through this because we started late, but it doesn't mean we have to finish late. So Expanding the Canvas is a collaboration I did with the National Canadian Ballet and the Canadian Opera Company, which is like the National Opera, and CERT, which is sort of a technology lab in Toronto. And what we did is we wanted to create space for young, diverse artists to come out of the studio. They're often doing small-scale studio works, often very localized. So we set up a series of labs, series of workshops where Canadian and UK artists met each other, really diverse group of people, very different routes into the art as well. They then could, at the end of those series of labs, just go, thank you, that was super interesting. Or they could put in a proposal. This is Violet Disruption. She is a collaboration between David Reed, who is a Canadian contemporary ballet dancer and who comes very much out of a long tradition of, he comes out of music videos, basically, as a music video dancer, and a UK composer called Steph Singer. They co-created Violet Disruption. She is a DJ. They were both interested in transcendence and how it exists in rave culture and in choral music. So Steph brought together choral and rave musically, and they started developing house. Almost like Lil Michaela, she has her own life, she's got her own backstory. David choreographs her and embodies her, so he dances her. They work together, and they haven't met now. They haven't met now, but this entire R&D was across borders. So nobody met each other. David was in a green screen mocap studio with Steph zooming in. They worked together, they cast the dancers together for there's a chorus. And it just for me was really, it was an experiment in this. I think for me, and I think I touched on it before, we have global problems, we have climate change, we have inequity, we have so much. So we do want to travel less, we do want to we have to work differently. We live in a climate emergency, but it doesn't mean that we want to be insular. We still want to work together, we still want to exchange. So for me, there is an exploration, like how do we connect across borders? Audiences, makers, the work, the making, how do we make it new? So for me, this was an experiment. Can we do it in a way that how much can we strip coming together? They have now met. The piece is actually in production or in development now for the Finnish opera company. They've picked it up. Again, constellation of work, really great. Don't own stuff, send it out into the world. But also, they could do so much without meeting. They could do so much, and then at some point they need to meet. And that's fine. Like, I don't really believe in a binary, like, everything needs to be completely local. That, I'm an immigrant and my insularity is death. But also, simultaneously, we do want to work and meet. So, that was that experiment. So for me, this is really what it's about. I'm going back to my quote. So give me one moment. So this is what I'm really interested in. I'm interested in that thing that I started to talk about at the beginning, that idea of culture as a laboratory, as a place where we bring audiences together for collective imagination, but also us as practitioners, treating ourselves as a place where we can experiment with new ways of making, new ways of being, new ways of thinking, create new images, new ideas, test them out. We're art, we're not brain surgeons, no one will die. We can push ideas, we can bring philosophers in, we can bring academics in, we can bring teenagers in. It's sort of our function. So I think the thing that I'm really interested in is how culture, as this sort of laboratory of imagination, as it sort of takes that role, how we can be part of a bigger constellation for change. A play about climate change ain't the end point. That's not what culture is for. It's nice, but that's not how we are part of change. So I think art is not a magic bullet for change, but it does allow for new sparks to emerge into the world. It does allow us to bring forth and document how we work, what we see, and then it becomes about how we found that. So who do we work with? So I think for me, the thing that I'm really interested in right now, and please join me in that, and do, I think that's where I am right now. That's why I took a year out of making work, is to think about why I make work, and how I want that work to sit in the world, how I can expand my collaborations beyond how it feeds the work and into also how the work feeds the world. What does that look like? It's not just about the audience seeing it, it's also about modelling like how we make the constellations and who we do it for. So I just wanted to say Stuart again, because culture after all is a matter of constructing a relationship between oneself and the world. People have to have a language to speak about where they are, what other possible futures are available to them. I think that's our role. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Annette, and you're brilliant with the improvisation skills through the tech issues. I'm so sorry. That was all engaged. We're now going to move to the Q&A portion. I'll come to you in a second. I just want to remind everyone who's online to please pop questions into the YouTube chat section and we'll come to you in a sec. But we've already got questions, so I'm going to pass it to you.
I was really interested in the early work and what happens to crystals, in terms of aftercare or like the ethics of role playing, those kinds of situations.
Yeah.
Kind of really thinking about power in this space.
Yeah.
Who has power in those kinds of spaces?
I think it's a really good question. I think we did okay back then. So the way we did it back then was work with the social workers they were working with and make it part of a larger plan they were part of. So we were embedded into something because I do think that care is super important, and sometimes I also feel like sometimes theatre makers pretend they're social workers and they literally don't have the skill set. So we did it like that. We worked with, but I think if I would do it again, I would make that relationship a lot longer. So I think definitely. So again, I made this 10 years ago. So I was really inspired and excited, and I think the thing that we got really right was that exchange and the facilitation around it. But also, that like we almost did it as iteration at that point, so we iterated here, and then here, and then here, and all those stars were quite nice. But I think what I wasn't very good at then was to create the resonance between the different bits. So that, you know, obviously everyone we worked with got invited to the local premiere when they toured, but I would now do more. I think the audience was super different. It was so interesting. So we premiered it in London at Battersea Arts Centre. To be honest, I love Battersea Arts Centre. It's so amazing. It was very much Battersea Arts Centre audience, where as soon as we started touring, it became very different. So weirdly, Scottish referendum had just gone. We got a really intergenerational mix. We also played in a nightclub, which was very different. And the shows were amazing. It was sort of electric because the audience was so eloquent. It was so alive. They were so eloquent within the show about power, independence, collaboration, because they just had that conversation. And then when we played it in Northern Ireland, very different show. An older audience, interestingly. And obviously, quite a long tradition of talking about whose country this is anyway. So I think what I found really exciting about that work is that it truly changes depending on who's there, and that was always a challenge, to make it open enough for the audience to truly own it and shift it and make it, and close enough for it to actually be good, right? So it doesn't, so it's a show, so it's theatre, so it's heightened, so it pushes people and surprises people. And power it becomes super interesting just per definition, because if I want to surprise you, I know what's around the corner and you don't. What does that do? So we always try to close shows by handing over by facilitating conversation between the audience about what just happened. And sometimes that works really well, sometimes less well, again, 10 years ago. But it's to understand there is power in those spaces and trying to subvert it rather than lean into it all the time. Sometimes also just the surprise element. So it's super interesting. And I do think, I remember, and this is really like a long time ago, working with a company as an assistant director who got that really wrong, who were just sort of bringing in so many people. At one point, I remember seeing this teenager, Central London teenager, was like, "Can I get paid now?" And it was sort of, yeah, you should. So I think there is sort of a dynamic there that is really interesting, and collaboration. So I think I'm interested in power and how you hand it over, and I think that's sort of what I try to do in some of these projects, to go like, I have some. How do I create a space that is interesting and hand it over? But it's complex still. Sorry? Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And we did do a lot of yeah, absolutely. Yeah. 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 No, and I totally get that, and we did try to sort of create, this is pre-word trigger warning, I think, but we did try to sort of, we took a lot of care in the communication of the show and the words, but yeah, I think I'd be more sophisticated about it today than I was 10 years ago.
Do you have any other questions?
Hi. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's sort of where God, there's so much unpacking your question. I'm almost unsure where to start. No, it's great. It's really wonderful, but it's also almost. So let me go in with it. So I'm currently very much. I'm interested in collaborations across industries. That's what I'm really interested in. I feel like I spend too much time of my time in culture, and sort of not. I feel like that's not what change happens. It's for me. It's about how does that feed into wider context. So I'm much more interested right now talking with people who are actively creating change, or working in activism, or in theory of change. It's a very particular term, you not so great, thanks. So I'm interested in that because I feel like we live in a world where imagination is really, it's almost like almost a privilege these days. And you have all these, then also you've got that whole idea of imagine futurism, which is mostly men behind locked doors working for governments and big corporations. So there is this beautiful article by an Indian sociologist, I think, called Nandi, which I will send to you, who talks about reclaiming the imagination of your own futures, and that we need to open up who gets to imagine the future and what that means. And I feel like culture has a role to play in the facilitation of those voices coming to the front. We have a civic structure, especially in Europe, where we're really publicly funded, but also in other places even where that's less so. I think culture can step into that role, so I'm interested in that. And what I don't think is that culture is the be-all and end-all, and that it needs to be able to do everything. Because I think that's hubris in its own right? So for me, it's about finding the right constellation to put work into, and also making sure that if we do an experiment, in a weird way, that even the rules do not apply. Is an experiment in IP and but like, to really explore where ownership lies and how you let it go, and how you work with institutions to let it go, how you work with artists to hand that over, but respectfully and beautifully, and how you work with technology companies to that over. I'm now feeling that in certain times doing the legal lab, where they work with a much larger sort of constituency of people who are looking at sort of how do we share, what does openness look like in the digital age? How do you respect creators and artists, but also don't let that become a stifling thing so that evolution stops? So for me, it's always trying to find an outlet of the learning, rather than the work itself becomes the pinnacle. It's also the learning and the shared knowledge that is generated by making something and finding something bigger to feed that into. Does that make sense? I have no idea if I answered your question, because it was really dense and beautiful.
Yeah, I think we've got time for 2 more questions.
Great, probably don't.
What extent do you think those tools of culture can be used to shift the mindset of those industries that are culture-centric?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? Yeah? I think that's what I'm interested in. I think the answer is I don't know, but I think the answer is not 0, nor it's somewhere in between that always also will depend heavily on the person whose mind you want to change and almost the topic. But I feel like we're not living in a world where small incremental change is what we're really after right now. I think we need some radical shifts, and they will happen whether we want them or not. So I think what we need is spaces for imagination to be part of a much larger move towards radical change. So I think that's what I'm interested in, the culture finding its space within a much bigger sort of plan forward. I personally don't think that a play about the Iraq War is going to stop the Iraq War, even if you play it to people who are so for me there is another answer. It's can we imagine how we work differently, who gets to work with who, how things relate to each other, how we relate to each other, and sort of the ideas we explore within the work itself. Can we be intentional about change and the futures we want to see and the voices we want to see represented in that, and can we then plug that into something bigger and don't stop at the play? I think about it as the play, but I also mean the painting, the exhibition. I think it's part and it has to be part of something bigger, but it needs to actively look for its connections and resonances to be part of change. Does that make sense? So not on our own, but also I do think imagination is super needed, especially right now, and I think that's what we're good at, so let's use it.
I realise we're kind of running past time, but have we got any other more questions from the audience?
Oh, no.
I'm just wondering, in that conversation that you were just having about around culture and change, how you're thinking about the role of technology in that. And I guess particularly in that kind of 10-year time span.
Yeah.
You're talking about a bit here about a shift in our own, I guess, both public perception and the reality of where we might situate technology in relation to like status quo. To be like disrupting current systems of power, it feels like it more often is perpetuated.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about as someone that's making with technology, like how are you thinking about that at the moment?
I've just been quickly asked online to repeat the question. I was
yeah.
asking midway through Joe was asking the question, so I didn't catch all of it. So, yeah, what's the role? How do you approach technology in relation to your work? I think is a summary. Technology and power.
It's a really complex question, and it's sort of becoming more complex by the day, right? Because technology is so complex, not because our relationship, like culture, because humans and system and technologies. So I think, from my point of view, I've always found technology a lever to open up processes and conversations that have just sort of, everyone knows how they go, we already know it, and sort of technology allows sometimes, and I do think that's shifting because it's so evil sometimes, but it can be used as a lever to open up, to just talk about change. So that's useful. I think the thing about technology I'm really interested in is that cross-borders thing, and that sort of having a material that's very differently malleable than physical. I'm really interested in the role of technology as a way of staying connected and being interconnected in a world where we move less stuff, physical stuff, we make less physical stuff. So there's stuff around that. But then there is the politics of technology itself, and that is incredibly complicated. And look, I put a flippant, not like this Mark Zuckerberg in that, and I truly believe that, but it's also complicated. It does so feel like David versus Goliath. I believe we have a responsibility to figure that question out. But dear Lord, do I not have the answer? Yeah. But we have to keep trying. I do feel like feel like quite often, in my frustration sometimes lies when these things become binary, where we have to say no to technology because it's evil, or we have to say yes to technology because it's the future, and go, can we just really question what kind of technology we want and where does it come in? Or we have to use only technology because climate change. Because we're also humans, we will come together, but can we work radically differently because of technology? I am really interested in the hybrid, in the middle, in the shift, in the connection between things and imagine something new. And technology as part of that. It's a little bit like that question we had with Eve, like at what point are we no longer interested in the ballet? At what point is technology too evil? We want to keep, it's always about humans, right? We want to keep so much of our humanity, we want to keep that alive. And technology can be helpful and it can be utterly destructive. How to overthrow Facebook? If someone has a manual, I'm here for it. I'll join that revolution. But I don't know what that is. If there is something to contribute to for culture, I'll sign up. Is that? I don't know. That's the answer.
Thank you, Annette. Thank you so much for your patience and everyone's patience with our technical difficulties here. I'm sorry we didn't have time for more Q&A. We'll be around to answer some questions now.
I'm so right.
There you go.
I'm in Bristol. It's so much fun. Thank you so much for basically for having me. It's such a joy always.
Before all of you go, please note there will be no talk next week because on Friday the 15th of April it will be a bank holiday, so hopefully we'll be having fun on the sun, a bit sunny. Please join us again on the 22nd of April for Resident Joe Hill and Hassan Murphy's lunchtime talk We Don't Bite, which will share the results of their workshops and conversations into how the PM studio can become more equitable and educational space for young people. If you want to stick around Hot Desk today or find out more about what we do, then please find one of the studio teams. Studio team, put your hands in the air. Woo! And we'll be happy to have. If you're watching online, drop us a line at studio@watershed.co.uk if you have any questions. Thanks for being here today. We'll see you all same time, same place in 2 weeks' time. Thank you.